Hello, I'm here with Pedro Pizarro. He is the president and CEO of Edison International, one of the largest utilities in the United States and a very big actor in the renewables and energy efficiency space. Welcome, Pedro. Glad to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Um,
Great to be here.
Super, yeah. So I just want to kick off. So, what is the message that Edison International really wants to share with the Climate Week audience this year?
We want to underscore that we are still in after COP25. And having been to Madrid, having signed the Paris Accord for our company when I first became CEO in 2016, we're serious about this. Our company is still moving forward with what we've called our Pathway 2045. It's our decarbonization vision for how California can achieve net zero carbon by 2045, which the state has targeted. And we see that the pathway to get there is to use clean, renewable power to electrify much of the economy. And that'll include three-quarters of passenger vehicles and 70% of space and water heating in buildings, along with using clean fuels for hard-to-electrify applications, and also using carbon removal through natural forest lands and direct capture for the rest. So lots of tools in the toolbox. But one recent example where we've had success lately was in how at our regulated utility, Southern California Edison, we got approval from the regulator for an over $400 million Charge Ready 2 program. It's going to be the largest light duty passenger electric vehicle charging program by an investor owned utility across the United States. And similarly, at our competitive business, Edison Energy, we're helping customers source and evaluate and execute renewable energy agreements. And those totaled almost 2 gigawatts in 2019, including facilitating the largest clean energy procurement in automotive history. So we're still very much in. And we don't do this by ourselves, Amy. We have partners across the industry. I'm vice chair of the Edison Electric Institute. I'm chair of the Electric Power Research Institute. So that means I get to work alongside my industry colleagues to drive this really important agenda for all of us. And maybe a final message is achieving zero net emissions. It's doable. It's doable as long as we have action across many areas. We need government, we need the private sector, we need our communities. So we encourage everyone watching this event to really think hard about how they can lead and how they can partner inside and outside of their sector to make real change.
Fantastic. It absolutely, you guys have been a leader and are being a leader. So really appreciate that, especially across the electric utility sector. I think that opportunity that you mentioned on electric vehicles, in particular with charging infrastructure, is a really good example of sort of the kind of the innovation that can happen. Sort of what are the challenges then you're seeing to get to, these are very aggressive goals. I think everybody recognizes the challenge that we have ahead. Is there something in particular that you see that Edison International needs to invest more in terms of innovation?
Well, I think, with our business, particularly in the regulated utility side, the core investment is really in having a strong electric grid that can access those clean renewable sources and can deliver the power to all the uses across the economy that need to be electrified. So I think the challenge there is how do we make sure that we're thinking through the right sort of programs, the right sort of build out, but importantly, then working with the customer community, because the reality is that the bulk of the investment that will be needed isn't electric grid investment. It's really investment by consumers in electric vehicles, by homeowners in terms of their space heaters or their water heaters, by industrial manufacturers in terms of their retooling their boilers and their manufacturing processes. So this is really an amazing scale of investment that's needed really across all sectors of the economy to decarbonize. And so the real challenge is getting to work, having a plan for how, where we're going in the long term, and then taking on the near term steps, which, admittedly have become even more challenging over the last year with the effects of the pandemic.
Right, exactly. I was going to ask you about that. I mean, California is really on the front lines of the climate impacts, as we're seeing with the forest fires, unfortunately, another devastating season of that. But coupled with COVID-19 on top of that, has that sort of changed your approach at all to how Edison is looking at decarbonization?
Well, I think all of us have had to change how we do everything in our lives. I mean, we're not talking in person in New York. We are talking from each of our homes right now, right? So, but we've had to obviously focus on how we help our workers adapt to new work environments and, focus on health and safety concerns due to COVID-19. Across our 13,000 employees at the utility, 2/3 of them have been working from home since March. So this is just unprecedented. A third of them are still out there in the field working safely to keep the lights on. But throughout all of that, we have not lost sight of our long-term vision for clean energy and electrification. And you mentioned the wildfires. I mean, when you think about what's going on with nature in California and across the West, we've had recent events like these truly unprecedented heat waves. It wasn't just a California heat wave; it was a heat dome across the West that strained California power supplies. We've had wildfires where just this year alone, we've had thousands of lightning strikes that led to hundreds of fires that have now claimed around 2 million acres across our state. All of this is catalyzed at a minimum, if not directly caused by climate change. And so that means that while we're having to wrestle with these things right now, we can't let them stop us because it's clear we can't take our foot off the pedal when it comes to moving aggressively on clean energy and electrification.
Yeah, absolutely. And you had mentioned that consumers, need to invest too. What's interesting is that it's going to create a better solutions for them, and usually actually more economic too, right? So investing in electric vehicles, et cetera. So are the consumers in California recognizing climate impacts and buy into this goal of decarbonization?
Yes, and let me give you two data points on that. The first is public polling. So there's the Public Policy Institute of California is a fantastic organization, nonpartisan, that does some of the best polling across the state. And they do a big annual poll around these kinds of topics. And for the last several years, consistently, we've seen 70% of the California population supporting the state's commitment to clean energy and to renewables and to addressing climate change. And that's really across parties, across demographic groups, really powerful. The second data point I'll give you is, to your point around economics, that's one of the things we looked hard at when we did our Pathway 2045 work. And what we saw was that if you fast forward to the end in 2045, after making all of these investments that are needed, there's a cost to that, right? There's an investment that needs to be made. But importantly, largely because electric motors are so much more efficient than conventional combustion or motors, that promises a much more efficient set of products and appliances for consumers. And so we see that even with consumers and using more electricity and probably having a higher electric bill because they are fueling their car at home with electricity instead of a gas station with gasoline, when you look at the total energy cost that the average consumer will take on in California in 2045, that cost will be 1/3 less in real terms than what it is today. And so that's the promise of moving to clean energy and electrification. It's not just about doing good for the environment, but it has real economic promise.
Yeah, wonderful. So, that's probably one of the messages that you want to share. So, sort of like why Edison is participating in Climate Week this year. But is there another reason why you are coming to Climate Week and playing such a strong role?
Well, look, it's a really important event, and like the COP meetings, it's an opportunity for all sectors to get together and hear each other out, and listen to each other, find ways where we can all work together more than we already are. Frankly, I like to see us take the lessons from the pandemic, where we've seen this incredible, unprecedented collaboration at a global scale to address with real urgency an issue that's frankly putting all of humanity at risk with COVID-19. Well, climate change is also a global issue with a real need for urgency that's putting the well-being of humanity at risk across the globe. So it's really going to take all of us working in sync to really make a difference on climate change. As for Edison, events like this really spark our renewed commitment to focus on these critical topics. And, again, while we've had recent events like the wildfires and the heat that have caused us to focus our attention on more near-term topics. And by the way, I would add to that the conversation around the country that's been catalyzed by the unjust killings of Black members of our communities. And so that's focusing our attention on serving our communities in the near term, but we haven't lost sight of our long-term goals. And we need to have this clean energy transition to do something about climate, and it needs to be equitable and it needs to be accessible to all. So we like Climate Week for allowing us to continue the conversations that we started at COP25 in Madrid, keep the momentum going, continue to share how utilities can play a role here that I think is critical, but it's only one of the roles needed across the entire economy. And as we look forward to COP26 next year, knock on wood, we need more participation from businesses. And so as energy companies, we know that we can make a difference, and we're already making a difference. In fact, emissions from the electric power sector today are their lowest level since 1987. And if you look at the members of our industry trade group for investor-owned utilities, the Edison Electric Institute, that membership has reduced emissions 45% between 2005 and 2019. And collectively, our member companies are on a path to reduce carbon emissions at least 80% by 2050 compared with the peak levels in 2005. So we know we need to be an active voice. We know we need to work with others to continue the progress. And we know that Climate Week is a great platform for doing it.
Well, thank you, Pedro. It's been delightful talking to you, and we really appreciate your support and participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy.